So learning from within, being a subject matter expert, being able to be calm under fire when things don't go right, being the rock in the room, that's helpful. I think a lot of women in particular have great style of performing under pressure, not being hot-headed, getting all the facts. You'll see men flare up when they don't get their way. I'm talking older. I think there's a new generation coming up a little bit better about this. But you know, try to learn about the product. She's on the comp, if Michelle's on the comp committee, then you better know what's the margins, what kind of product, what kind of service. You need to understand the company and not just flit in and just go, okay, it's about strategy and razzmatazz. Because the comp committee, audit committee, and maybe now risk are certainly about knowing about the company and where they're headed in competition. So the person who has most information generally wins, right? They almost always do.
Yeah.
So use to your strength, knowledge about the company, competition, market dynamics, and read. Please read. So, I mean, I read, so National Geographic, Business Week, Fortune, Consumer Reports, Sports Illustrated, The New Yorker, Forbes. I read letters to the editor in particular. I want to hear controversial stuff. I'm reading JAMA articles where I can understand them. You know what that is? Journal of American Medicine. They're really technical. So the ones that they're doctors who get published in JAMA that are doing science, statistical analysis on the efficacy of a drug. But I try to read letters to the editor, The New Yorker, so I get Wall Street. I don't like their editorials. It doesn't fit for me, but it's helpful to understand the other side of the equation. I think the newspaper's good. Their editorials are next to Rush Limbaugh, from my viewpoint. So, but it's helpful to understand. So as it relates to the company, you sort of have a filter that you're picking up, you know, dynamics in the mining industry, what's going to happen with precious metals, and what happens when Russia shuts off nickel supply, and what about selenium from China. I mean, kind of have an idea about the industry. Does that make sense? The question you want to ask yourself is, am I enthused about what I'm doing? And if you're enthused, you'll do better as a board member. Do I like the industry? You might not, but do I like it? That's helpful. Do I like the company? Do I like where the company's fitting inside the industry? Do I like the leadership? Is there alignment? Does that make sense? And so when you do, you'll start absorbing stuff that's technical and maybe will put you to sleep, but you're learning. And if you do it all the time, every day, or every week, trying to absorb something about the industry, then you get to be smarter and smarter. And after a year, you go, holy crap, I know a lot more about this than I did. If you come into a board meeting, you'll unseat some of the old timers who've been around for 20 years. You know, this is the way it was. And, you know, you're there, right? And I think almost every industry is being disrupted by technology, whether we like it or not. Whole Foods, how did that happen? Right? A whole bunch of stuff like that. So the speed of innovation and disruption that used to be talked about by Jim Collins and Tom Peters is happening in front of our eyes. So to the extent that you, in your area of expertise, can have some understanding about where disruption can occur, not just whether American Express is going to lose Costco, but what does happen with international blockchain, you know, currency on a phone, so that it's encrypted such that you can't get mugged because you have money in India, right? Understanding some of the things that could be disruptive, whether you think they're going to be or not, is helpful. Does that make sense?
Yep.
The pharmaceutical world and CVS and insurance companies, there's a lot of dynamics going on there. Google is not going to sit still. I think Amazon probably is going to hit a wall here, but there's a technology revolution happening, social media, devices, and the like. You got to stay intellectually up on that, and your opinion is as good as mine because nobody knows for sure. So you're on equal footing with the smartest cat in the room, because it's a whole new era and they don't know. Their crystal ball isn't any better than yours. Does that make sense? It's an even Steven game. You know, unless you're Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos or Warren Buffett, you're pretty much intellectually starting at the same place as the rest of the people there, because the past is dead as it relates to some of the traditional thinking. Does that make sense? I'll stop there. Ask for.
Have you written a book?
I know what I was asked it by Mark.
Notes for it.
You should. I mean,
I know,
this
right?
is brilliant.
Right.
I know the title. I told Mark that. I don't really belong here, because in many cases I go, this is really me. What am I doing in this room? So that's the title of it. But I don't really belong here.
So can you talk a little bit about how to get on boards? Any advice?
That's a toughie. That's a toughie for everybody today. Obviously, there's more privatization companies coming along, so it isn't whether it's public. People go, oh, it's public or nonprofit. Not so. Dell Computer, you know, Cargill. I mean, there's a lot of private companies that are sitting out there that act just like public companies, and they have pretty much the same FINRA and financial accounting rules and so on and so forth. So getting that first one is hard, and you need to just press your network. You got to find people like me. Where's there an opening? Most of the board positions historically have gone to people who other board members know. So it's always who in the board knows somebody, and you need an activist like me or somebody else that says, no, let's open our aperture up here and take some risks. The first one is always a risk. Are you going to be any good on the board? What are you going to bring to the dance? A lot of women head down the audit path because that's pretty, you know, if you've got a financial background, everybody needs somebody in audit that's pretty good. But risk, nominating and governance, I think is a good one, but you just don't, it's hard. So it's a networking. I'd play every relative, every friend, LinkedIn, Women's Vision Foundation, just network the heck out of things so you can get in a position, at least be considered. And then you do your homework. Does that make sense? It's hard. The first one's hard for me. I got on Polycom because of my title, not because of me. I was ahead of all of the network at US West on 14 states. I had 26,000 people working for me. I had a technical background. I'd also been marketing and sales. So I had this thing in the phone industry that was unusual. And Polycom was interested in doing video conferencing, and Skype wasn't around, but the concept of everybody can do video conferencing on their phones. So the view was that let's find somebody who's in that industry, and they found my title, and then I backed into it. And then once I got in, then I could help. I mean, it took 2 or 3 years of being on the board, but I ended up being on 3 other boards. Were bought because of the kinds of things we talked about, and then 6 private boards, mainly tech boards, and then this company. So once you get in, then it's helpful, but that first one's hard. And I think what we're doing here in Denver and New York, actually, and Los Angeles, San Francisco is good. So I don't have a magic formula. It's hard work. Keep your eyes open. You know, be persistent. And looking for opportunities. Start small if you can. I think going for the big one is hard.
So did you keep getting board seats because of who you were meeting, or because you were already on a board, so you showed up somewhere?
I think retrospectively it's because I was on a board, public board, and I was being perceived as doing a good job in the role that I was in. So I was back as a CEO, and having learned finance, I was on the audit committee, but I got put on nominating governance because of the kinds of things hopefully you're picking up on, so people management and things like that. In the case of Polycom and my own board, give it to Mikey, I'm the nice guy. So had to exit 4 board members off of Polycom, 1 conflict of interest, 1 person not showing up, 1 because we had an age limit that I thought I didn't agree with, but he was a friend. So giving feedback and transitioning the people off the board is something that is hard, but I've developed sort of this moral compass to be able to do that. And if the board member's not cutting it, they need to wash them off. And there's more and more of that going on. So should open it up for diversity. Should. But you got to be in the cycle, right?
Yeah.
It has to be there. And so I inherited this job from the board at Sarascan because the CEO committed suicide. So I stepped in, 48. So I stepped into the role of CEO. But we had, I wouldn't name drop here, that would not be a good idea. There were 2 people on this board who were noted financial people, Chicago and New York. And they were great people and contributed very little to the company. They reviewed our financials, and then they reviewed our financials. And then they reviewed our financials. There wasn't any strategic, can you open us up to Mayo Clinic? Can you come in with some new idea about how to do electronic health records? Nope, they were financial, super solid, but for Sarascan that wasn't gonna work. And I said, you're gonna have to leave. And they're like, I can't believe you're treating me this way. I'm like, here's what we need. And I brought in Heather Potters. Do you know Heather? It's PharmaJet. You need to talk to her.
Okay.
She's awesome. She's amazing. 20 years in Poland, investment banker, started a startup. She's cool. So I went out to try to get talent, and she was one of those. Both of them were audit, so I had to go get a financial person, and it turned out it was a man, but he had been at, he had run the Children's Hospital Foundation, so he had medical, Steve Warnicki.
Oh, yeah,
and
I know Steve.
Yeah, and he'd been CFO of Frontier, so you know, he punched some tickets. Not that I wouldn't have gotten a woman, but at the time I took out 2 old geezers and brought in 2 ready to rock and roll people. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I've had to do it to another person. And it's sort of hard, but you need to stay with the organization that's going to take you to the promised land. And those skills can become tired, are not advantageous to the maturity of the company. Does that make sense? So turnover is good
Yeah.
where it's appropriate, and it isn't always because somebody broke the rules. It's they're not adding, and that's hard, particularly on a board. So, but there's a lot more of that going on.
So can you talk a little bit about, because what I've shared with the ladies is the fact that as a board member, you're not doing the work. You're not at
Correct.
in the executive, but you're overseeing it. So talk a little bit about the expectation of an active, productive board member and how they do bring value.
So that's why I brought up to Michelle's point, what does a good board do? Not all of them are good, right? So assuming these things are here in place, then you can participate within those rules because the company is there. Clearly, the board is really about strategy and managing the CEO. I mean, at the end of the day, set the strategy, agree to the strategy, and that's a collective effort. Management will bring in strategy, but almost every good company has an annual strategy process, and they'll bring in outsiders. They might bring in McKinsey, they might bring in whomever, they might bring in somebody from the Chancery in Delaware, you know, if you're talking about corporate structure or something. So you bring in outside experts to the degree that you can to augment and validate the strategy for the company. Huge pressure on short-term strategy, way more tactical than it was even 10 years ago, but you need a long-term and a short-term. So the long-term has lots of risk associated with it because you're, depending upon who's in your stock, if an activist shareholder is there, they're not interested in long-term. If you have hedge funds in there, typically not interested in long-term. So you fight having them understand that long-term is helpful, and they have little interest in long-term. So it gets to be very tactical, but you got to have both. As a board member, when they say, well, you represent the shareholder, today it's what shareholder? What is the share? What is that shareholder's motivation? An activist like Elliott Management, who's come in twice on 2 boards, on Polycom and Emulex. So I was a point person on one of those, so they have a different view. Hedge funds have a different view. Institutional investors, the American Expresses and Putnams, and have a different view. So you have to sort of blend something together that makes sense. And you're going to hold your stock price, and the CEO and the team can deliver the results. It's hard. It's getting harder. So you're part of that strategy. So therefore, the kinds of things I talked about, the meeting before the meeting, understand the company, what are the trade-offs, what are the risks, you know, good, better, best plans. They're not going to be part of the record, but what does sales think we're going to do? What does marketing think we're going to do? And what does finance think we're going to do? You know, when is the timing of products and sales? I mean, you're really trying to work that. So the board, you have to work hard as a board member, make sure you're comfortable with that, and test the hypothesis, and listen to the naysayers as much as the supporters. Does that make sense? The management team, it's obviously the responsibility to the shareholder, what shareholder, but then how do you set expectations, give feedback to the CEO? I happen to like CEO split from chair, even though I'm currently chair and CEO. And at McData, I was chair and CEO. But it needs to be, in my view, it needs to be split. Having done it, it needs to be split. It's too much conflict of interest in the long run.
Yeah.
So supporting the CEO, but the CEO is responsible for the team, but I think the board can help there. So I'll give you another technique that I use for my days at Xerox, and that is before an operations review, let's say you're doing a company review or the strategic planning, or before the board meeting, I will ask, and even in this company with 22 people, so the direct reports to the CEO, right? At the start of the meeting, not after the minutes are done. So you're going to do minutes, right? You're going to introduce the new people there, and have you come to San Francisco, whatever. So I want an org chart up there, but more of an executive org chart. And I want the CEO to talk about each of those people. How are they doing? What's their skill set? Where do they want to go? Are they risk? How's the team doing? How are they performing? Just a general narrative, right?
Yeah.
So I'll use a practical example, but if you do that over every quarter, now you start getting an idea about, I'm having a little trouble here, this person may have to leave. You start getting early warnings. Does that make sense? But let me give an example. So let's say you're getting ready for a new product launch or merger and acquisition, and you've got new people in marketing, sales, manufacturing, distribution, finance, and you have to talk about those people. You go, this one needs work. I'm going to try to help. They need some outside counseling. I need to get a coach. This one's a rock star. This one is a steady person. You ask for, all right, tell me why, what are they doing? So then you get into finances. Well, here are our numbers for the quarter. Here's what our plan looks like for the year. You kind of go through that. Then marketing comes in and says, here are product launches or product performance. And you find out the launch in the Far East, Asia Pac didn't go well. You go, what happened? As a board, I mean, you can phrase your question. Well, you know, we didn't, there were shipping issues and we didn't quality control. You go, well, who was responsible for that one with this group? Well, didn't you say that it was they were really good? They had a great team and good at coaching? Yeah. So was it like a little flub up, or, you know, something happened? All right. What happens then the next time? Think about that. So you've already gone, you want to have a team. If you're going to have this, if you're DaVita and you're going to sell or maybe you're Optum and you're going to buy DaVita, right? You know that's happened, correct? Or a big part of it. And they've got the clinics. It might be helpful for Optum to know how the integration of these clinics into the insurance world is going to occur, because they've got two different cultures. One's walking around in costumes and the other one, you know, is Minnesota nice. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So you got two different cultures. So because we bought it, how fast does it get integrated, and who's the person leading, what are the integration team? What are the risks? Then, well, it's not going so well. We've got the Texas group, you know, is still, do you know what I'm talking about? DeVita does the Three Musketeers, and that's a one for all and all for one. So, you know, we're trying to get them over to the insurance culture because you need culture as fast as possible. Then the next quarter comes. Well, we're still having difficulty. We're losing share. You know, our competitor is doing pretty well. The turnover is pretty high. Who's running the show? You already told me it was weak. Does that make sense? So as a board member, you get a sort of an early warning system about the capabilities of the company. Does that make sense? And in the boardroom go, you know, help me through, what are we doing? So sound like a good person. So how's that fitting out? And if you do the meeting before the meeting, 2 or 3 of the board members can ask these questions so it doesn't look like you're on a witch hunt or you're flashing your cards. Does that make sense? Then the feedback to the board, to the CEO, you need to stand your ground. So when the meeting's over, good boards excuse the CEO and have the conversation about what are the 3 things we want to tell the CEO. Not 15, because they'll go do 15, and the 15th one, there'll be a check the box, but they missed the top 3. Does that make sense? Okay. So here's the 3 feedback, and here's my concerns. Here's what I heard. So you've got instinctive, intuitive, some bit of data, some whisper that you have an idea, and you've got concerns, right? About the ability to execute. The skill set below the first level down is weak. It's new, hasn't been trained. They're going to go into fire drill. There won't be time to go back and do the coaching and counseling. We bought this company, it's got to go. I can't go back to the shareholders and say I missed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you kind of get in a position where you can ask the questions in such a way that they're not accusatory, but you're framing up the question such that I'm really trying to help, that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
And that meeting at the end without the CEO, that's on the record? That the secretary also leaves, or
Yes,
not?
everybody's out, so the chair of the board takes the notes and then communicates directly, usually right after the meeting, but in some fashion, to the CEO. That's not part of.
It's not part of the public record? Okay.
No.
That's no
Nope.
problem.
Nope. It's a very important meeting. And if they start wandering around too long, your smell test should go off, like, what's wrong with this picture? We can't come to consensus. You know, what, am I missing something here? It should be fairly quick, pretty concise, some consensus. There'll be debate. No, let's give that person more time. No, I think that, you know, he'll work it out. You know, you'll get those types of things, but you don't want them to drag on. If you have an organization, if you're going to play Bolero, right, the Ravel, you don't have a lot of players in there, right? You've got the bassoon, you've got the flute, you've got the baritone. So they all better be pretty good, because one of them will sink that ship. So in a lot of cases, you need to have players that can hear each other, can do the crescendo the right way, because it has to keep building without peaking too soon. So there's a lot of cross-functional communication, but you can't do it with a weak person. And you need to ferret it out. Doesn't mean they're bad, that they're just not going to be in sync with the rest of the team. And you'll see that in sales and marketing and product, that their sales outrun the marketing or product development. It usually will manifest itself there, that none of those, somebody's out of sync with those other two. Sometimes in engineering and product development and marketing. Okay.
Good. Well, we're almost done with our time. so-
Okay. Is this helpful?
It's
Yes.
a really interesting, like, big picture.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, really.
Well, get inside, learn the product,
Yes.
and you'll have some contacts. Don't talk to anybody in the board, or rather the company, without calling the CEO. Don't find out you're best friends with worldwide marketing. That's great. Go to the CEO. Do not go through and break that. Even though you get permission, so yeah, fine. Call John. No, you call the CEO all the time. Things can change. They want to know who you're talking to, and the back door, what's she after. You know, you make sure you're coming in through the front door all the time with that. Don't make that mistake. You don't want to create more problems in rumor control. You just don't want it. You don't want that rumor control out there about you. And at the board dinners, you make sure you circulate and talk to every key executives there. And find out about their life. What do you like to do? How are things going? Do you like the industry? Get some sense, get them to talk. Don't say, hey, how's the product launch going? That's fine. You'll learn about that in the meeting. You want to learn about them as people. Does that make sense? You'll get some sense about their vulnerability. Are they being recruited? If you do it over time, you'll see how that their attitude seems to change, and they don't even notice it, but you see it because you've got snapshots. Something's different. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Something I've been picking up, listening to you, Michelle, and others I've been talking to, is your role in the board, especially in the on-the-record meetings, is more to guide through strategic questions rather than statements. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Literally, your phrasing should be a question, because that is, I don't know, that's just a sense I'm getting.
You try to get some observations. I think I put some in there, but you know, I had some experience in Singapore with the banking, and I'm not sure how you're running into that today. You know, I'd like to hear kind of how you handled this problem that I was faced with, right?
Yeah.
So you're asking a question in a very non-conflicting way.
Yeah.
You're truly interested in learning more because you may not be right, and you're teeing up something that then somebody else may follow through on because they've said something that's a little cockeyed, right?
Yeah.
That we haven't thought about how do we get that money out of Singapore cash, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's
So-
a subtlety, but I think it's really
It's
interesting
huge.
and important.
And that's when you see that you're an elegant, graceful board member. You've got this sort of pre-programmed into your brain. It sounds bureaucratic, it's not. It's extremely efficient over time. And don't think you're going to get treated fairly. Doesn't happen. As soon as you think it's free speech, democracy, you've lived it, women. But don't get under this false guise that everything is fair and square. It might be, but don't count on it. Just keep your eyeballs and ears open.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Term limits, are they good or bad?
You know, I don't know for sure because, you know, we got a person on our board's 82, who's a founder of Mucinex. He might as well be 35. And then there are other people who just aren't engaged. I think it's really around energy, engagement, desire to learn. There is some tie to that, to age, right? But I have a hard time now because I'll be 69, and the odds of me getting on a board, a public, are none. Because if they invested time in me, I'd have to term limit out pretty quickly. So I've hit a wall. I probably hit it some time ago, but ask me if I think I can contribute. I do. But some of my peers are not in that place. You know, they're more interested in golfing at Pebble Beach. I mean, they got a whole different lifestyle. They don't really want to get involved. They like the income from a board, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the term limits are hard.
Yeah, I would agree.
I don't know. I think you got to take out dead weight, and that's hard. And good boards do that.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Oh my gosh.
All right. Well, hopefully it was helpful.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.